Hello, spooky soulmates, and hello, Kayla.
Hi, Rachel.
How are you doing today?
Good. Hearts are heavy.
It's going to be a little bit of a heavier episode today. We are covering the case of Gabby Petito. We are trying to figure out the way to portray her case in the most respectful and the most
helpful,
useful way. So it's Sunday night. What is the date today? It is the 19th of September. We had already planned on recording this episode prior, just because when there are high profile cases out, just like any other podcast, any other person with a platform, you want to get the information out at the pertinent time.
Right. And we had a lot of people asking us to cover this. You know, a lot of people don't want to go searching for all of the information. They'd rather just hear it in one format. And that was kind of our goal with this, was to just have all of the facts in one place.
Right. So we had planned on releasing this episode prior to some information that came out just a little while ago, and it makes it a little bit heavier because unfortunately we found out that Gabby is no longer living. There was a press conference earlier this evening that stated a body had been found in the Grand Teton National Park, and that body was Gabby.
Yeah, it was very heartbreaking. I know that Rachel and I were waiting on that press conference with heavy hearts, and we were both anxious as could be. And sadly, that is the case, that she is no longer with us. But we are going to go forward with some of the things that we had planned on. We aren't going to be discussing the more out there theories because I don't find them respectful. And you can find plenty of that on the internet anyway. So we're just going to focus on what we know is confirmed to be true. And hopefully we will see some justice for Gabby Petito in the near future.
On the Good Luck Sleeping podcast, we cover paranormal, we cover conspiracy theories, and those are a little bit more of our lighter topics.
Yeah.
Some conspiracy theories can be a little heavier, but we look at things in a lighthearted way, and we're able to kind of provide that information for you with those kind of topics in a lighter way. With the true crime that we cover, we try to be as respectful as possible because we're not doing this at all for entertainment. We are doing this because there are bad people in the world. There are horrible things that happen. And if we have even the smallest platform, we think it's pertinent to get the information out in a respectful way. And we've actually had a case in the past where we've brought the information forward and been a part of convicting a criminal and finding justice for somebody that we had talked about, which is Elisa Turney.
Right. And who knows what could happen in the future if they aren't able to find Brian. That could severely hinder, prosecution in this case. So anything that we can possibly say to get this story out there. And I know there's a lot of media coverage now, but to keep the conversation going so that it doesn't just dwindle. And then we hopefully can find some kind of resolution and justice in the end. That's our goal.
So, I feel with the research that we've done that I got to know her. And when they released the statement that it was her that they had found, I teared up. Like, I was invested in her. And in this case, I had really hoped, and Kayla and I had discussed possibilities that she would be found okay. And this could have just been a misunderstanding, right, or she was having a hard time mentally. But unfortunately, it had the worst possible outcome. It's still a criminal investigation. There are still things to be found, but we're very invested. So what we're going to do here is I am going to break down just kind of like getting to know them. The only thing that we could do is look at Gabby's social media, and
which she had a large digital footprint, and they've actually talked about how they think that's probably going to help in prosecution.
Exactly. Yeah. So she documented where she was, when she was there, who she was with, so that those are good things. But we were able to get to know her a little bit through her social media. So we're going to dive into that first. I'm going to break down the timeline of her trip across the country with Brian. And then Kayla is going to get into her own topics here and maybe some ways that the case could possibly end up.
Yeah. Some theories.
Okay. So first of all, Gabby and Brian, they had a YouTube channel together. It was called Nomadic Static. And the description for the channel was just, hey, we're Gabby and Brian. Recently we decided to downsize our life into a little Ford Transit Connect to travel across the United States. There was only one video on the channel so far, and it was titled Van Life, Beginning Our Van Life Journey. It was 8 minutes long, and I actually watched it today. It was super artsy, super well done. It was just clips of nature, them going to the beach, them swinging at parks together, holding hands, eating together, just their van and just what was inside of it and how she decorated it.
It was like a really happy life, really happy story.
Right. And their demeanor together, I did note that it felt kind and laid back. You know, that's what they chose to portray.
Right.
So watching it, it was a very peaceful video. There wasn't a lot of talking. I think the only talking that happened in the video was just Gabby kind of explaining her day. She was putting together some granola and, you know, just making breakfast and just her life.
Yeah.
Okay, the next social media that I was able to dive into was their Instagrams. Gabby's was Gab's Petito. Her whole page had kind of the same vibe. It was a very natural aesthetic.
Yeah.
There's the word that Kayla doesn't think I pronounced correctly. It had, influencer vibes. She was a beautiful young girl, and it was just her and all these gorgeous natural backdrops. And I could find from the Instagram that she started dating Brian back in 2019. There were also some drawings that she'd put on there, and she seemed to be an artist and liked to draw. Some notable dates. On February 14th, the couple got matching finger tattoos. Did you see that?
I didn't go back that far, but that's really sweet.
Yeah, so they got finger tattoos that matched. They were like a vine with leaf outlines. Hers, I think, was just the trace of it, the outline, and his was filled in. So, again, that was a notable date. It kind of showed a little bit of their relationship. On July 2nd, there was a picture of them eating sushi together, and it said, here's a picture from our first date because I have so much love for you. Brian asked me to marry him, and I said yes. You make my life feel unreal, and every day is such a dream with you. The last tagged place on her Instagram was Arches National Park in Utah. And the last picture was a series posted on August 25th, and Gabby is wearing a long skirt and a black shirt, and she's holding a crocheted pumpkin in many of the pictures, and there's a monarch butterfly kind of mural in the background, and the caption simply reads, Happy Halloween, and it has a pumpkin and a fly emoji. And I thought this was kind of notable because it was unlike a lot of her previous posts. Normally she had there were a few exceptions, but normally she would post a pretty big description of what she was doing and kind of her insight into it. But this was just very simple, kind of out of place because they're supposed to be on a trip across the country, and it's just a photo series about Halloween. So
in August,
yes.
There was also, the flies thing was weird to me because, and we'll get to this in a moment, but in the body cam footage, he told the police officers how the flies out there were intense and they were really getting to Gabby. So I thought it was weird that they chose a fly and not a butterfly like was in the mural.
Right. I thought the same thing. I'm like, there are butterfly emojis. Why did you pick that one?
I know.
Okay. On to Brian's Instagram. His was bizarre_design_. The first picture posted on his was a picture of him and Gabby. It was that same picture that Gabby had posted of them eating sushi on their first date. And it was posted on Brian's account on July 2nd. And his caption was, it's been an incredible year, by far the best of my life. I've seen so many beautiful places, had so many amazing experiences, and all with the best sidekick in the world. And then there's two more dates that I noted. July 3rd is a picture of them in what seems to be like wedding guest attire. It was just fancy attire. They're looking at each other, and his caption was, my biggest fear is one day I'll wake up and it will have all been a dream, because that is what every second has felt like since the moment we found each other. Till death do us part, or until I wake up. I'm so happy the answer was yes. Love you, honey.
That's really ominous considering the case now.
Correct. His last post was on August 13th, and it was pictures of him on rock formations in Moab, Utah, and the caption, I didn't write it down. It was him comparing humans to trees.
So the thing that I noticed about Brian's Instagram, and this actually is pretty important with one of the theories, he focuses a lot in his later posts on recycling, be good to the earth, you know, humans and primates, they're similar. That's what that caption was.
Right.
And his point was saying like the apes take better care of the earth than we do.
Okay.
And if you look at the last two posts on her Instagram, the one right before the end is a caption talking about basically a piece of crap person who left behind their trash.
I did see that.
And that made me kind of suspicious because she had never talked about recycling or anything on her page.
So with Gabby, obviously we don't know her, so I can't like talk on who she was and what she was about. But it did kind of seem like with Brian, she formed a little bit to his thoughts and beliefs, because she was in a video. They kept showing this one like clip on all of the news stations, and it was like, Gabby, I never want to go outside. Gabby never wants to go outside, or something like that. And then her world with him became driving across the country, living out of a van, talking about sustainability and eating natural things, you know. So I don't know. I don't have enough to go on of her pre-Brian.
Yeah.
So,
well, and supposedly they had known each other all their lives.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They had grown up together. That's what I had read somewhere. And it was interesting that they decided to go out on this van life together. I do think that Gabby had more of a business mind about it. I think that she was hoping to make it into a career, you know, like a traveling nomad kind of thing that a lot of influencers do these days. Because there was a lot of times where Brian would talk about how, you know, Gabby was working on our social media. Gabby was working on our website. Gabby had to stop off and do this. And it almost seemed like a point of contention at times. But I do think that she took it more as like a business, and he just wanted to be out there and explore.
Correct. Okay. Well, there was a few other social medias that I'll just make a note of. They had a website, but it wasn't yet active. And then they had a Spotify playlist, or a Spotify account, and it had 11 playlists, and their name on Spotify is Nomadic Static, the same as their YouTube. So,
and it seemed like they both had access to it, and they were both using it because they would list some as by Gabby and some by Brian.
Correct. Yes. Okay, so the next part is the timeline. We're not going to, this isn't going to be much of a discussion. It's just literally breaking down the facts of what we know and the dates that we know them.
Right.
So you're going to hear paper rustling in the background because
Rachel's old.
I'm an old person and I like to print out my notes. Okay. July 2nd, Petito and Laundrie depart. The couple had been in Blue Point, New York, where she's originally from, to celebrate her younger brother's graduation from high school. They departed New York on July 2nd for a planned 4-month cross-country journey. According to a Petito family attorney, the pair had gotten engaged, but postponed their wedding plans because of the coronavirus pandemic and decided to take the trip instead. They were driving Petito's white 2012 Ford Transit van, which, according to one of the Laundrie's posts on Instagram, they converted the interior to allow them to camp and cook meals inside of as they traveled. Again, that was all documented in their YouTube. According to their social media posts, the pair traveled from Florida to Kansas, Colorado, and Utah, touring and camping at several national parks and national attractions. So they left from New York, but in some places it said they left from Florida.
No, so I'm showing that they left from New York as well. I think it's just a misconstrued information that they came from Florida. There was a time in the trip, and we'll talk about that, where Brian supposedly traveled back to Florida. But as far as we know, Gabby left from New York and never went back to Florida.
Right. Okay. That confused me because it kept like, it was information that wasn't solid. Okay.
Yeah.
August 12th, we're going to talk about this. I want to talk about this in depth after I go through the timeline, but it's their altercation in Moab, Utah. On August 12th, police had an encounter with Petito and Laundrie, and the pair was described as having engaged in some sort of altercation, according to a report released by the Moab City Police Department. Officers were called to reports of disorderly conduct and encountered Laundrie and Petito along with a witness whose full name was redacted from the report. Laundrie and Petito are described as having gotten into a physical fight following an argument, but both male and female reported they are in love and engaged to be married and desperately didn't wish to see anyone charged with a crime, according to the report from Officer Eric Pratt. Police later released the body cam footage of the officer's encounter with Petito and Laundrie, during which Petito is emotional and crying through much of the video. Laundrie says that the couple got into a minor scuffle that began when he climbed into the van with dirty feet. Petito admits that she slapped Laundrie when she thought that he was going to leave her in Moab, and the couple also states that Laundrie did not hit Petito. Laundrie has visible scratches on his arms, face, and neck, and the police took photos of his injuries. Petito was nearly arrested, but since both parties said that they were in love and didn't want to press charges, the couple agreed to separate for the night. Laundrie was put up in a hotel by a domestic assault outreach group. Okay, another interesting notation was there was a double homicide around the same time that Petito and Laundrie were in, where was it? Was it Moab?
Yeah.
Okay. And that was in mid-August. So double homicide. Kayla's going to talk a little bit about that later, but that doesn't really pertain to their timeline, so I'm not going to go over it in too much detail now. All right, August 25th was Petito's last known whereabouts. She was last known to be in Grand Teton, Wyoming on 8/25/21, heading towards Yellowstone National Park. Petito's stepfather, Jim Schmidt, told CNN that the young woman communicated regularly with her mom and family. She would go off the grid. Okay, so this is him talking. She would go off the grid doing her van life stuff, exploring these different areas, so it wasn't uncommon for her to go off for a few days at a time. But she'd always make her way back to some place where she could get onto a Wi-Fi connection, upload to her Instagram, make phone calls, FaceTime, etc., he said. Someone who's been traveling and contacting family, then all of the sudden goes dark, that's obviously odd, Josh Taylor, a spokesperson for the North Port, Florida Police Department, told CNN on Tuesday.
Yeah, and even her dad had said that he had a really bad feeling that something had happened.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking too, because it's rare for
a parent
to go
feel
there.
That way. Yeah.
On August 27th, Gabby communicated through Snapchat, and she told a friend that she's heading towards Yellowstone. Obviously, we don't know for sure if that was Gabby, but it's in there. August 29th, a woman picked up Brian in Grand Teton. So a woman named Miranda Baker on TikTok claims she picked up Brian Laundrie at Coulter Bay in Grand Teton National Park. Brian was allegedly hitchhiking when Miranda and her boyfriend encountered Brian around 5:44 p.m. He said that he needed a ride towards Jackson, where they were actually heading anyway. During some small talk, Baker claimed Laundrie mentioned he had been camping, quote-unquote, for multiple days without his fiancée, who he said was working on their social media page back at their van. When Baker claimed to have brought up the couple's own plans to go to Jackson Hole, she said that Laundrie allegedly freaked out and insisted he get out of the car. Baker said she pulled over at Jackson Dam, not far away from Coulter Bay, at 6:09 p.m.
And he said that he was going to continue hitchhiking, but we know now that's probably not the truth.
Right. August 30th was Gabby's last communication with the family. Petito's mother, Nicole Schmidt, said that the last text message she received from her daughter came on August 30th. Her family said that they do not believe that message was sent by Gabby. It reads simply, "No service in Yosemite."
Which is odd because Yosemite is located in California and they were in Wyoming and Utah heading to Yellowstone.
Right.
So.
All right. So September 1st, Laundrie returns to Northport. Laundrie allegedly returned to the Northport home he and Petito shared with his parents on September 1st. Police said he had driven the van there and Gabby was not with him.
Again, how did he get from Yosemite or Yellowstone in one night?
Right. September 11th, family reports Petito missing. On September 11th, Petito's family reported her missing to the Suffolk County Police Department in New York at approximately 6:55 p.m. When police in Florida knocked on the Laundrie's door that night, his parents handed them a lawyer's phone number. "We don't know what Brian knows, that's the bottom line," Taylor said. "We are hopeful to talk to him. He needs to talk to us. We need to know exactly where he was, where she was, their last locations, and the fact that he was here for 10 days. Again, the family reported her missing 10 days later. Their van was processed for evidence, and Taylor said that there were some materials that will be investigated further. September 15th, Laundrie was named a person of interest. On Wednesday, Laundrie was officially named a person of interest in Petito's disappearance, and Northport police said that he was hindering the investigation. Laundrie has not made himself available to be interviewed by investigators or provided any helpful details. His attorney issued the following statement on behalf of his client addressing Laundrie's silence. Many people are wondering why Mr. Laundrie would not make a statement or speak with law enforcement in the face of Miss Petito's absence. In my experience, intimate partners are often the first person law enforcement focuses their attention on in cases like this. And the warning that any statement made will be used against you is true, regardless of whether my client had anything to do with Miss Petito's disappearance. As such, on the evidence of counsel, Mr. Laundrie is not speaking on the matter. I've been informed that the Northport, Florida police have named Brian Laundrie as a person of interest in this matter. This formality has not really changed the circumstances of Mr. Laundrie being the focus and attention of law enforcement, and Mr. Laundrie will continue to remain silent on the advice of counsel. September 16th, Northport press conference with the father, Petito family letter. And police in Northport held a news conference during which Petito's father begged her for her safe return and for Laundrie to speak up and stop hindering the investigation. Later, Petito and Schmidt's family attorney, Richard Stafford, read aloud a letter to Laundrie's parents pleading for their son to speak to them about Gabby's disappearance. September 16th and 17th, Laundrie's sister speaks to Good Morning America. Did they know if it was September 16th or 17th?
Well, I have, it was shortly before Brian's parents reported him missing that she came out and said she just wanted the best. I don't think she was involved. I think she really, truly wanted the best for Gabby.
Yeah. So they had an interview with her and basically she just said they want Gabby to be found. She's like a sister and my children love her. And all I want is for this to be a big misunderstanding.
I think it was earlier in the day before the police were called to Brian's parents.
Got it. Okay. September 17th, Laundrie family reports Brian missing. Police said Laundrie's attorney contacted authorities Friday because the family wanted to discuss his disappearance. They claimed they had not seen Brian since Tuesday,
which was the 14th.
Yes. They removed items from the Laundrie's house to assist in the search for him, according to his attorney, Stephen Bertolino. Police said on Twitter that it was the first time that the Laundrie family had spoken with them about the case in detail. They reiterated that Brian is a person of interest in Gabby's disappearance, but that they are not currently working a crime investigation. Both he and Potito were considered missing persons at that time. September 18th, dual searches for Potito and Laundrie. Police searched a vast Florida wildlife reserve on Saturday for 23-year-old Brian Laundrie, a person of interest in the disappearance of his girlfriend, Gabby Petito. While across the country, FBI hunted for clues about the missing woman in a mountainous national park in Wyoming. Well, the search was called off Saturday night due to darkness. Nothing was found. They were obviously again searching for Brian today. And today
they called that one off at 4 p.m.
Okay.
And then Gabby's, they had found a body, I think around 3.
Yes.
And said that they were going to speak on it, which was 4 their time, and confirmed that it was her.
So that is where we're at.
Yes. I think let's back up to the 12th, because that was kind of the first time that we had a glimpse into how everything in their relationship might not be the way they're portraying it. So we see the body cam footage. There was also the police report was released. Just kind of a quick overview of the body cam footage. You know, it showed, like you said, Gabby was crying. Brian, he was kind of laughing and making jokes with the police officers. He was concerned about being in the sun with his bald head. Meanwhile, she didn't care. They were saying, get in the car to the air conditioning so that you can cool down. She was just upset. Like, she wasn't worried about herself. It seemed that she was blaming herself for everything. And you could tell the things that she was saying, she had heard said to her. So she was saying, you know, I'm sorry. I know I can be annoying. I know that I'm overreactive and I like things clean. And I just kind of flew off the handle. Like, you could tell that there had been some verbal abuse history there for anybody who's had that.
So it just, because I've been in relationships like this before where you feel crazy. Like, the person makes you feel crazy.
And that's common in narcissistic abuse.
Right. So we're not saying that he's a narcissist. We don't know, but this is what we observed. And
we do know his sister did say that they had volatile fights and that he had narcissistic tendencies.
So I feel like Gabby I can't say that she made 100% correct choices. Mm-mm. But when you are pushed that far mentally and emotionally, you can't help kind of what comes out of you sometimes, because you're made to feel crazy and you're made to feel in the wrong. And she was afraid that he was going to leave her. in Moab.
Well, and apparently he had threatened to leave her multiple times. So her being afraid, like, he's got the keys to the van. She even said that she doesn't really drive the van much. I don't think she was comfortable driving it. They both mentioned to the police that they both have mental health issues. Anxiety was named, and she named OCD for herself. So clearly they've been in this small container space
Right.
for months now. They've been traveling, and clearly that kind of stuff, like, if you've been in a relationship before, nothing will test your relationship more than being stuck in a car together
Right.
for a really long
Very,
time.
very close quarters. And if it's not a really healthy relationship, all of those dark things are going to come out because there's nowhere for you to escape to.
Right. And I think that was kind of the issue, was she seemed like she felt stuck, but she also didn't know how to be without him a little bit. You could tell that she seemed a little bit afraid about him going to a hotel, but she was being respectful of the fact that they were separating them. And that's what the police ended up doing, is they put him in a hotel. They gave her the van and said, don't contact each other for 24 hours. Brian seemed completely upbeat and happy. And he did say that he loved her and that he didn't want to press charges, but it did seem that there had been a lot more history behind that exchange than they gave, for sure.
Something that she said on the body cam was she was talking about how he made her feel like she would fly off the handle, or how she wasn't calm. And she said something like, but I am calm. I'm always calm. You know what I mean? So there was just like a little bit of her sticking
glimpse.
up for herself, like peeking out there, you know, and just like her kind of rising up, peeked out there in that sentence, for me, at least. I don't know. And
I personally was very disappointed with the direction that the police took on that. I'm sure now they're probably regretting that direction, but they definitely sided with him, and because he was the only one who had scratches. And it felt very unfair. I mean, she's a tiny 5'2", 110-pound girl. She's clearly not an actual threat to Brian. And they never stopped to think, like, okay, maybe she's just having reactive violence. Like, maybe she was responding to something he was saying to her. And he even said that when it first started, he was saying, look around at all the people, Gabby. You're drawing attention to us, and like trying to shame her based on the people around rather than validate what she was feeling. And it seemed very one-sided.
let's talk a little bit about the physical part in this, because what had happened was somebody had reported the incident. They were driving. We see with the police that Brian was driving and he was speeding up a little bit, and then he ended up hitting the curb, the curve, and they pulled him over. Apparently she had taken the wheel, and because they were fighting, she said, I can't believe we're getting pulled over. And she took the wheel and tilted it towards the street, ended up making the van hit the curb.
Now, something very interesting. In the body cam footage, she denies grabbing the wheel.
Really?
Ryan is the one who said, well, she grabbed the wheel and pulled us over. She said, I punched him in the arm, like, look at what you've done. You know, because he was the one speeding. Okay. And she was angry with him that they were getting pulled over. And the cop even said, did you grab the steering wheel? And she said, no, I never touched the steering wheel.
I thought she confirmed that.
Yeah, and see, that's what the news has heard, because they went with Brian's story, and they had put that, like, I even looked at the police report. Mm-hmm. Like, they listed who the person was. It was a man who was concerned for her safety, not for Brian's safety, and he said that she had been shoved and her face was grabbed.
She did talk about that. So he had scratches on him. She had ended up scratching his face, and
yeah, I think she was trying to smack him, and like her nail caught his face.
I mean, I'm not saying that she was in, okay. she did do some damage, you know.
Men are just as vulnerable to physical abuse. We're not saying that's
right.
Okay.
So that was what he had on him, and with her, he had grabbed her face, I guess.
And he did admit to pushing her away to try and create some space between them. He did say that he had tried to calm her down and say, let's just walk away and come back to this. But in doing so, he also threatened to take the car keys and seemed to be leaving her, yes. Which I think triggered her anxiety that she was going to be left in this place in the middle of nowhere.
Right. And when you're that high up emotionally,
you don't think rationally.
You don't. And being threatened to be abandoned is definitely not going to help the situation. So it was heartbreaking to watch that police cam.
And I think it's a good point to have just like a little discussion on mental health. They both said that neither of them were treated for their mental health issues. So they identify with having mental health issues. They know that they are, the worst sides of them are coming out on this road trip, yet they don't seek out any kind of treatment, any kind of help. They just continue back to each other. And I think, there's such a stigma on mental health. You don't want to admit that you have a problem or that something might be going wonky up there, or maybe you're acting crazy because it's a mental health problem. But this could have been avoided had they both received treatment.
Yeah. And I was actually talking to my neighbor about this too, and he's a retired police officer, and he doesn't agree with how it was handled by the police. He thinks that they needed to both have been at least taken into custody, figured this out, because
maybe had a psych evaluation.
Right, because they clearly were not okay that day.
This moment was absolutely pivotal, I think, to this outcome. Had this been handled differently, I think this would be a different case that we're discussing.
So again, to piggyback on the mental health discussion, Kayla and I both know firsthand how pivotal it is to seek treatment. We have sought treatment for our respective, mental health. I don't want to say issues, but we have anxiety. I've dealt with depression. I
have bipolar disorder, which everybody knows already.
Yeah, so there shouldn't be a stigma. If you need help and if you're feeling out of control, please seek help.
Yes. That's not weak. No. I think that there's this misconstrued notion that seeking emotional help is weak, but your emotional well-being is just as important as your physical. You need to look at it as like a broken leg. It's just your brain. It's an organ, and it sometimes needs a little booster to be able to function properly.
Yeah. Your physical and your mental health go hand in hand.
Yeah. Okay, so after the body cam, they were supposedly separated. Of course, we don't know how long they had a lack of communication. We don't know what occurred there. There's the only evidence that we have that they stayed separated was the last posts on Brian's Instagram were from that day, the 13th of August, and it showed him out in the wilderness, seemingly propping up his phone on things to take photos of himself. I don't know how he got out there if he didn't have the van, but it was noted there's a strict difference because Gabby had taken all of his photos of him up until that point. Now, because there was like FaceTiming and stuff with her later date, I don't think that she was gone at this point.
Right.
But it did show that they were not together because he was using rocks to prop up his phone and they were really bad angles and not his typical caliber of photo stuff on Instagram. And then around this time is when the double homicide occurred, and it was literally in the same area. So I was going to cover that real quick. They don't think that there's a connection to it, but I do think it's important to find justice for these two ladies too, to mention their story and what happened. Crystal Turner and Kylan Schultz were the two women who were found dead on August 18th to multiple gunshot wounds. They had last been seen alive August 13th at Woody's Tavern in downtown Moab, Moab's a very small town, so it's kind of close to everything in downtown Moab. Their friend Cindy Sue had been having contact with them. They had texted her and said that they had a creepy guy that was kind of making them uncomfortable and they wanted to move their camp, and then they went dark. And Cindy Sue was like, she reported them missing, but then she wanted to go out and find what she could to help them. And she unfortunately came across Kylan's partially clothed body that was laying in a creek with multiple gunshot wounds on August 18th. She said that her arms and legs were at a really weird angle, so definitely signs of trauma had occurred. She was afraid that the killer may still be around, so she went to go get some help from the police, but she had a theory that Crystal was a little bit further down the river. There's not much else known about this case, but there was a theory floating around that something had occurred between Brian and Gabby and these women, because this is such a small area.
Yeah.
And this area is not known for crime. Crime rarely ever happens here. And here they've got now 3 murders in the same space.
Such a small time frame.
Yeah. So I think it's, for people who like to think and theorize, it's kind of like a natural thing to be like, oh, what if Brian's a serial killer? Or what if they killed... to me, it's disrespectful at this point to assume or theorize that Gabby had anything to do with this. I really don't think Brian had anything to do with it. And the police are saying that there's no connection. So I think everybody out there theorizing that just needs to let that go because it's disrespectful at this point.
Right. I mean, I want to find out what happened to them for sure.
Oh,
and the fact that somebody is still out there that did this is terrifying, but not related to Gabby and Brian.
Right. And I mean, who knows? There could be some kind of connection there that they haven't discovered yet, but I don't think that Brian or Gabby were involved in those ladies' deaths. So the 13th, we know that they were supposed to be separated. We have photographic evidence that suggests that they were separated on Brian's account, and we talked about that. Shortly after that, Brian was supposed to have flown home. He was supposed to be helping his family move his and Gabby's stuff into a storage unit for some reason. I don't know why she didn't go with him.
Yeah.
But she was supposedly in a hotel in Salt Lake City, Utah during that time. And he came back, I want to say on the 23rd. And then they were leaving. They were supposedly checking out of there. And she had a phone conversation, like a FaceTime conversation with her mom that they were going to Yellowstone. So that was already set. It was expected that they were going to be there. And then on the 29th of August is when Miranda Baker picked Brian up as a hitchhiker. And that whole weird thing went down.
That is very odd.
All right. So August 29th is when Brian hitchhiked. August 29th was also supposed to be when Gabby was to text her best friend to meet her and Brian in Yellowstone. Her friend never received a text message. And according to the Daily Mail, her best friend claimed that Brian Laundrie had jealousy and control issues and even stole her ID once to stop her from going dancing at a bar and made her delete a tracking app so her pal could always locate her. So he was it sounds like he was trying to cut off connections. Gabby's friend claims that Brian would sometimes have episodes where he would have schizophrenic symptoms and that she recalled Gabby having anxiety, but for it to be like it was in the body cam video, something must have triggered it. She also claims that she is one of Gabby's only friends because Brian does not allow her to have more and that she has seen their relationship becoming more toxic.
Shoot.
And then August 30th is when Gabby's mother received the no service in Yosemite text, which is odd because Yosemite is approximately 800 miles from Yellowstone and clearly a mistype.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the next day he's in Florida.
Yeah.
So the fact that her closest friend knows that he has a toxic background, that he's already treated her a certain way, he's already tried to be controlling and manipulative, that to me is enough grounds to say, okay, he's definitely suspect numero uno.
Yeah. And kind of going back to the relationship a little bit, again, in the body cam, there was just so much insight between what it was like between them. And I think it was Gabby that had brought up the fact that Brian really didn't respect the fact that she had just quit her job. She was like, what was she, a nutritionist, I believe?
Yeah, she was a nutritionist and quit this job to go on this thing and like try to start a career out of it so they could actually sustain it, I think.
So a lot of work goes into making a career and a job out of blogging and out of YouTubing and just social media in general. And apparently Brian really didn't support her, didn't think that she could do it, she said, and that was weighing on her as well. And I think added to her mental state of that day and probably just of that time period.
Right. And the guy that had reported the altercation between them, he feared for Gabby.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason he called the police. He wasn't fearing for Brian.
And you could tell when the police pulled them over initially, they were concerned about her too.
Yeah. I think he sweet talked them, unfortunately. And he kind of disarmed them a little bit with his jovial attitude. But for me, it just seemed like deflecting. Mm-hmm. And that was a big concern. Following this whole thing, he had a Spotify playlist that he created out of nowhere, but then he was also listening to a ton of really dark songs. And I don't know if you looked more into that.
I looked briefly over the playlists. I didn't really dig into them too deeply.
Mm-hmm. It was all songs about losing your love and very, very pointed songs, very dark songs that, really concerned people. Mm-hmm. This is kind of where the Yellowstone zone of death thing comes in. Do you want to talk about this right now?
I don't know what this is.
You don't know about the Yellowstone zone of death?
No.
Okay. So there is a 50 square foot zone in Yellowstone National Park that doesn't have a jurisdiction. It's technically in Idaho, but Wyoming has jurisdiction there. And because of this confusing caveat, there is a loophole that basically says if somebody commits a crime and the body is found there, they cannot be tried by a jury because they wouldn't know where to pull the jury from. And so it creates this perfect little area that if you dispose of a body, you're likely going to get away with it.
Wait. I had no idea about this.
Yes, because the governments can't decide who gets to claim it.
Uh-huh.
And so they say Wyoming has jurisdiction, even though it's technically on Idaho land, but we can't put a jury here. So anything that happens there is free.
But that's not where she was found.
We don't know yet.
Okay.
She was found in Grand Teton, so I would assume that that was not the area, but there was a theory following that he had dumped her body there so that he could get away with it.
Good God.
Yeah, I don't, like, just decide. Allow a jury to
figure
be
this
there.
out, people. Yeah.
So I know that we kind of briefly covered their Instagrams and some, inconsistencies in them, but there were a couple things that were really interesting to note. People noticed after the fact, even up to now, that Brian is actively deleting people's comments. He has limited comments so that people can't continue posting. He was reading messages that people were sending him. They were showing as read. And there was some woman named, I'm going to leave her name out because I don't want to put anything on her, but he had added her and then people started pointing it out and it got down on TikTok and he deleted her immediately. But she was from where they were from in New York. Where Gabby was from in New York.
A possible family friend or connection or...
Yeah. And it was odd that when people started calling it out and said, hey, he just followed somebody, then he deleted it real quickly. And it could just be some girl that he had met. We don't know. I mean, I don't really want to theorize too much because I want this to be factual and everything, but it does... It's weird.
It's odd.
That your
sure.
girlfriend is missing, presumed dead at this time, and you're actively just chilling on Instagram. It just seemed weird.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another thing. She had a trail tracker on her phone. And from what I've heard, it's manual to update. And so when she was in Yellowstone, she would update it to Yellowstone. When she was in, she would update it as she was going. It now says she's in Puerto Rico.
Currently?
Yeah, currently.
Okay.
So who changed it?
Yeah.
There was theories that maybe she changed it hoping to be going there, but we knew that she was talking about going to Yellowstone. So that was just super duper weird. And I had a theory that maybe he took her phone with him and flew to Puerto Rico if it automatically updated. So maybe they should check out Puerto Rico. But,
yeah. Well, they know that she probably didn't have her phone for a while. Yeah. It wasn't on her person because of the texts that were sent, the strange wording. It just, when it wasn't her, quote unquote. So.
Right. Well, and even in the body cam footage, at one point, he tells them he doesn't have a phone. And then at the end, he pulls it out.
He pulls out the phone.
And she had her phone in her hand.
Yeah.
So there was definitely a lie there from him.
Yeah.
So you wanted to talk about Brian. Let's get into this guy.
Okay, so I want to start with the hitchhiking. That was just such an odd situation.
Yeah.
And he really wasn't even with the hitchhiker or with the people that picked him up for that long at all.
Like 6 miles.
I think she said 6 to 10 or something. And the fact that he freaked out when they said that they wanted to go to Jackson Hole. What was that about?
I have no idea. They very clearly said he didn't stink. He didn't smell like campfire. Mm-hmm. It was very obvious he wasn't dirty. He didn't look like somebody who had been camping for 3 days. Jackson Hole, like, they assumed when he got in the car that he knew they were going to Jackson Hole. And then when she mentioned it, he freaked out and was like, pull over right now. I've got to get out. And they pulled over in this rest stop and he was like, I'm going to hitchhike with other people.
Yeah.
And it was so bizarre.
Isn't that where he said he wanted to go?
I thought so, but there's like 3 or 4 different Jackson things there.
Okay.
And
so maybe he just thought it was a different one, or
I don't know. And the thing is, he probably was planning on, if he is the guilty party, which at this point I think he is, he was probably planning on leaving her car or circling back, like trying to get somebody seeing him going a different direction. And then he realized, oh crap, somebody's going to find the van if I don't go back for it. You know, something along those lines, because within 2 days he was back in Florida with the van.
So let's talk about his thought process.
I don't know if I can make sense of his thought process with this.
It doesn't make any sense at all. So, okay, let me go back. Okay, he returns on September 1st. That's when he's back in Northport.
So it's from the 29th to the 1st. That's 3 days.
Yes.
That he was definitely picked up and seen in Jackson, Wyoming. And then now he's in Florida with the van. But he doesn't alert anybody, and his family doesn't alert anybody. They just call a lawyer.
So from August 30th to September 11th, Gabby's family had no communication with her.
And if you ask me, the text that was sent to her mother sounds like somebody panicking because he misnamed the park.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it was him.
Right. I feel like he was just trying to sprinkle in some little bit of tidbits for her family so that they wouldn't start to think anything was wrong.
Right. And if you look at his Instagram, or at her Instagram too, they have been edited weeks after they were posted, the captions. So that was super bizarre because she would post something like 7 weeks ago and it had been edited a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Right around the time that everything was happening.
So definitely some panicking, I feel, happening. So September 11th, the family reports her missing, but what is Brian's family doing in this time?
I think that they were getting their story straight and making a plan.
And then letting him get a head start into this wilderness where he can obviously live off the land for a while. This is kind of his thing. So I'm just so concerned that we are not going to find him in a timely manner, or we're not going to find him at all, or we're not going to find him alive.
Yeah.
And there's just not going to be enough closure for her family.
Well, and also his parents. So they told the cops, we think he's at the Carlton Reserve. He liked to hike. He was last seen with a backpack on with like a waist strap. So that's like one of those heavy duty backpacks. So they go to the Carlton Reserve. His Mustang is there.
Yep.
And they take it home. They don't call the police. They don't tell the police. They drive his Mustang home. And then the police sees it.
I don't want to jump to conclusions and say, hey, I mean, clearly something's wrong here. But there's so many things that are just pointing to him that he can't not be involved.
Right. So let's talk possible theories that are actually factual at this point. Obviously, number one, Brian murdered Gabby in cold blood. He's definitely acting very suspicious. Definitely seems like he had something to do with her death because he's literally tried to cover it up and fleeing. You can tell.
Yes.
The second idea is that they got into an altercation. It wasn't premeditated and he accidentally killed her. I mean, they've clearly had physical altercations before. So say they were hiking, they had a steep trail and he just reactively pushed her. She could have fallen down and died. And then he panicked.
Right.
And he could be absolutely torn up. He could be in shock, and just spiraling, you know? There is another theory that there's a theory that they were both unwell and she could have committed suicide. And I think the cops have not called this a homicide yet because they are investigating that. You know, she has said that she was struggling with her mental health. We don't really know. I tend to not think that that's the case because she seemed like she was enjoying going forward with life. She was enjoying living, but she was just frustrated with some of the things she was dealing with, you know? So I don't think that they're going to find that that's the case, but it certainly is a possibility. I mean, if you saw your loved one commit suicide, you'd probably act pretty erratic too, and then start panicking. They're going to think I did this, you know, depending on what the nature of it was. So I know it's really, really easy to point the finger, but we do have to remember he is innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah. Another thing that could have happened was something accidentally happened to her. Like, again, they were hiking, she fell, he couldn't revive her, something happened where she just had passed and he panicked again. And because of the footage of the police and with everything that had led up to it, he again panicked, knew that he would probably be a person of interest, and that's why he's acting the way he's acting now.
And there is I consider it to be a wild theory, but it is plausible that both those women and him and Gabby encountered somebody very, very dangerous out on those trails. Mm-hmm. And something happened where the guy only killed the women and left Brian alive. And it definitely paints him in a bad light. Like, if it was a gun, they could definitely easily pin that on Brian. Mm-hmm. So you have to remember, like, this could be some other person entirely. Although I think if I were Brian, I would just say what happened.
Exactly.
Instead of running, instead of trying to lawyer up and all this stuff. I think, considering everything that we've seen so far, the way that Brian's acting, the fact that Gabby has now been found dead, I think that it's very unlikely that Brian is not the responsible party. He's probably most likely is.
Correct. Yeah. It's hard because, again, we've been following this case so closely, just watching her full of life, watching her excited to start her YouTube, and understanding that life isn't there anymore, that has been snuffed out, is heartbreaking. You know, it's very sobering to think of her not being here anymore. So I'm sure that as the week goes on, there's going to be more that's brought to everyone's attention from the police's investigation, and we'll have more answers. But we just wanted to put out what we could. And again, we're not trying to be disrespectful in our theories. They are just that, theories. We don't have the answers, but we do want justice.
Yeah, and we just wanted everything that was plausible compiled in one place. Obviously, with things that aren't absolutely confirmed, we can't be sure that that's even involved. But just wanted to put all of the options out there. I'm sure that the police are following up on everything, but just to have it all in one space. And hopefully over the next couple of weeks, we will have some kind of answer, hopefully actual justice and not just more sadness. All right. If you have any information regarding this case that you think might be important, such as potential sightings, photos, videos, or other details concerning Gabby Petito or Brian Laundrie, you can actually submit your tips anonymously online at tips.fbi.gov, or you can call them by phone 1-800-CALL-FBI. So hopefully this helps and we can see a resolution for Gabby.
We know that this isn't a typical feel for our episode, but that's just the nature of what we're talking about. It is somber and it's sad, and good luck sleeping.
Good luck sleeping.